Welcome back to the AI-Driven Marketer, where we help marketers move faster, build better, and think smarter with AI. And today, I am freaking stoked to share this project that I whipped up over the weekend because I had heard on Twitter that some developer, I don't even know who it is, but I'll find the link to it and put it in the show notes for this episode. But some developer was really smart and he's like, hey, I put together a whole podcast series around mysteries around the earth. And I did it in 2 hours. Isn't this cool? And I was like, oh, I have to try this. As a podcaster and an AI marketer, I have to try to put together a whole podcast series in 3 hours. And I did. And that's what I have for you today. And not only am I going to share with you the series and why I think it's a series that you will actually enjoy listening to, but I'm going to talk about step by step how you can do the same thing. Now, a few caveats before we get started. While this process works really well in delivering good content, there are some drawbacks to it. And I don't think it's quite ready for prime time yet. So if you have a high trust brand, this probably isn't something that I would put out there. If you have a lot of trust with your audience and you have to be pretty careful about what you do, this isn't for you. This is very experimental because it can be factually wrong. In fact, some of the episodes I put out have some errors in it. To the point where I'm like, it doesn't really throw it off too much. I'll probably have to put a few little statements in the show notes for each episode because each episode has one, maybe two things that I'm like, that's factually inaccurate. Enough that I'll put it in the show notes to preface it. But for the most part, these episodes are fantastic. So, Lo, what is this podcast you made? Let me tell you about it, right? It is called Marketing Legends, the Pioneers Who Shaped Our Craft. I've been wanting to make a show series about some of the great marketers through the ages for years now, but it never was feasible for me because it requires so much time to make a series like this that it took too much research. It took too much time to just script it out and do it all. But with AI, I was able to do it in 3 hours. And I would say I love listening to them. I actually know a lot about each of the men that I have done an episode on. And I love still listening to the AI actually talk through them and actually explain why they're relevant, what marketers can learn about them now. Here's some elements of the story that are interesting. Super fascinating. I actually like listening to my own series. So check it out. You can actually find it on Spotify and on Apple under Marketing Legends. Again, the pioneers who shaped our craft. It goes through Josiah Wedgwood, Claude C. Hopkins, David Ogilvy, Lester Wonderman, Rosser Reeves, Philip Kotler, and Seth Godin as some of the OGs of marketing. So take a look at it. I'll link to it in the description of this podcast episode, of course. But in fact, I'm not even going to give you an example. You just need to go over there, pause the episode, go and listen to it for just a few minutes, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Go check the link in the episode. Take a pause now. Okay, now that you're back, let's talk about how I actually accomplished this and made this. Why does it sound so freaking good? Or at least I think it sounds good, but maybe I'm just in love with my own creation here. I don't know. You tell me. There's 10 steps that I used to create this series, okay? And so I'm going to walk through all 10, and you'll find that the first step was just fleshing out the ideas with AI, and then it moved to the structure, to research prompts, naming, description, design direction, episode descriptions, using Google Notebook LM, and then setting it up on Spotify. So all 10 of those steps get you a completed podcast that's fully ready to go. Okay, so let's walk through it step by step. So step number 1, you got to flesh out your idea. First, you have to have, in order to have a good podcast series, you really have to have an original idea to start with. What's the angle that you're coming out with? And you don't really you could flesh out an idea with ChatGPT, but in this case, I already had the idea. I wanted to talk about the backstories of these marketers, and the content didn't exist out there. I wanted it to exist because I've had to do deep dives and just bind the biographies and the longer books of these guys. But I wanted to make it more accessible for other marketers to enjoy and learn from these legends as well. So that was the idea. And so I started the prompt off with, and I'm going to show you on my screen here. And if you're just listening, don't worry, I'll be talking through it as we go. But I'll have ChatGPT, just ChatGPT 4.0, and I say to the chat, I'd like to start a 7-part podcast series that tell the stories of 7 marketers throughout history that help marketers better understand their roots. Here are the 7 people, and I list off the names. Are there any others you would think would be better than these 7 men? It kind of gave me some idea, threw out some names: Gary Vaynerchuk, Al Ries, and Jack Trout. There's a few other names. I kicked around the idea of Al Ries and Jack Trout, but I ended up not putting them in the show, so I just didn't have enough material for them. And there's 2 instead of 1. It's just simpler to stay on one person. So I then went and said like, hey, help me organize the episode structure a bit. I'm thinking about going something like this. Opener about a common marketing method or tactic all marketers know and that was developed by the man. A brief story of the man, what foundations they laid for future marketers and what we can learn from them today. What would you add? And it gave me a beautiful timeline back. It talked about conceptualizing the era and making it easy for people to understand what it was like for them. Given a key campaign and breakthrough moment, the cultural influence and legacy they leave. It also gave me an idea that I didn't use for a challenge or a criticism they face. I just said to leave it out, leave it all on the optimism side. And then actionable takeaways. And I said, great. Based on that, let's take out the criticism part, build me a full show outline for this. And it knocked it out of the water again. Here's the outline. Here's the episode outline, and gave me a full outline, each with one like opener with an objective and example, a brief overview. And again, each one of these points has an objective statement and an example. It has a brief overview, the story of the man, key campaign breakthrough moment, foundations laid for future marketers, cultural influence, what we can learn from the today, actionable takeaways, and closing, right? There's the show structure. It was fantastic. I went the extra step, and this is key. This is key for using Google Notebook LM. If you want to use ChatGPT to do the research that you then put into Google Notebook, once you have your outline, you then want to ask it to turn the outline into questions then this is the prompt that I use. Great. Now turn the outline into questions that I must answer to pull in enough research to build the episode on. Write the questions in such a way that I can use them to guide me through each episode. And so it did so. It took each of the sections and asked 3 critical questions, sometimes 4 or 5. And so we're going to use that in the future step. So now we are on, okay, so that was step 3, research prompt. Now we're on step 4, coming up with the name. I said I didn't even give it a really creative prompt, and I've done a lot of prompting and ChatGPTs on naming. I just said, hey, help me come up with a unique yet clear name for this series. And because I was trying to do this in 3 hours, I didn't spend a lot of time here. I just picked the name. It gave me a list of 8 names. I picked the first one, Marketing Legends, the Pioneer Who Shaped Our Craft. That's the name. From that, I said, hey, let's use the first one. Based on that title, we'll recommend a repeatable structure for the episode titles because, again, we're trying to knock out 7 all at once here. So, bam, it came up with the idea of use the legacy impact of marketer's name, how their key contribution shaped modern marketing. So we have an example of the legacy of Josiah Wedgwood, how product innovation shaped modern marketing. And again, the genius of Claude C. Hopkins, how scientific advertising revolutionized marketing. You can see how that repeated show structure brings a level of interest to the show, to the series, rather than just individual titles, but makes the individual titles stand out too. It's a really good idea and show structure for this particular series from ChatGPT. So I just went with that. I'm like, yes, perfect. I then went into asking to write a show description. It was good as is. This is now the show description for the show. It wrote that, a couple paragraphs. And then I asked it to move on to, so that was skipping ahead of myself. That was step 5. Step 4, naming. Step 5, description. And then I went into step 6, design. I actually asked it for, instead of asking it to jump right to come up with the cover art for it, I asked it for ideas around a visual style that would fit a show like this for the cover art. It went and gave me a number of different styles, from classic meets modern to bold, clean, and iconic, retro, futuristic, and heroic. And I then asked it to turn each one of those into a visual design. So if you're looking at the screen with me, you could see the visual designs that this came up with. I gravitated towards one, but I ended up taking a different direction because honestly, it just struggles to put the words in the art. I even went over to MidJourney, and I'll show you that here. You can see I went through multiple iterations, even in MidJourney, with the words in it, but it just struggles. It might have got Marketing Legends right, but it just had all these kinds of weirdness in it. It just can't, it struggles to do design. MidJourney and DALL-E are great at coming up with illustrations, images, photographs even, but design, it can come up with some elements that you can use in design, but it struggles to make a fully formed design. So I went instead to creating just the illustration that I then had to bring into Photoshop to create the typography for it to make the full design. And you can see I settled on this design here. That is like kind of that iconic, almost silhouette, but still kind of old school photography, Mad Men looking 40-year-old guys in like black suits and white ties, black tie, kind of a thing. Because that's just kind of the feeling when people think of like marketers, even though Josiah Wedgwood had a very different dress appeal. Still, it was good enough that I just went with it. So that is step 6, the design direction. I went to MidJourney, came up with my image, and then went to Photoshop for the rest of that. Step 7, research. You can't just put stuff into Google LM. You actually have to give it the right stuff. You can't just throw a bunch of stuff in there. So I went and then switched over. I actually did a fun thing at the end of this ChatGPT prompt. I said, hey, I'm going to pass this over if I can find it here. I'm going to pass... Here's the prompt. I said, take everything you've learned and write a summary to pass off the details of this project to another AI. So it wrote a long summary that I then copied and pasted because I wanted to move from ChatGPT 4.0 to ChatGPT 4.0 with Canvas, because I needed to start making documents for the research, right? Because the canvases are really useful. If you don't know about the Canvas section, go back to last week's episode. I'll put a link to the show notes again for that too, because the Canvas element in ChatGPT is awesome. I wish you can go back and forth between these models, but you do have to jump. So I said, I need you to do some research for my project below, what you have below, but don't start working on anything until I prompt you a second time. And then I just dumped all this stuff from the other one to transfer the project from that chat to the new chat with the Canvas. And then it said, got it. I'll wait for you to prompt to dive into the research for the podcast series. Again, this is step 7 of doing the research. And then I said, I want you to create a canvas to begin the research for each person on the list for the show. Let's start with Josiah Wedgwood. And then I copied and pasted those instructions, that outline with the questions that we talked about back in step 3, the research prompt. These become really important because that becomes the prompt that generates the canvas. So it takes the outline and all the questions for every part of the outline. For example, let's just take this opener. Introduce the common marketing method. What is the well-known marketing method or tactic that this marketer pioneered or popularized? How is this method used in marketing today? Can I provide a relatable example of this method in action that resonates with modern marketers? And that's just the opening. So it's taking that and then answering it and putting all the answers to it in a well-formatted canvas. So let's take a look at one of those canvases. And this is what it came up for Josiah Wedgwood. So now we have this canvas with Josiah Wedgwood. You can see each question is fleshed out into a well-written bullet point, right? And it's well organized and it's all organized by number, right? So we have Josiah Wedgwood Research for Marketing Legends podcast. Opener, Introduction to Common Marketing Method. And it's organized. And we have the second one, the third. It's a pretty long document. Of course, it can only go so long. I wish it could go longer, but it's only to give you so much output because they got to put a limit somewhere. So I did that for Wedgwood. The cool thing about Canvas is you can be like, great, now do the same thing for the second guy. Because, again, it already knows the second guy used the same format as before. So it did Claude Hopkins. And I said, now do the next one, next, next. And I just went through all 7 like that, and I used the research for each one just like that. I said, now create a canvas that includes the full show breakdown based on what you know. So I created a full show breakdown that I then I'm going to be using for marketing later. I then went and actually started, before even taking it to Google Notebook, I actually started crafting the descriptions for each episode to paste with each episode. We already had the titles created earlier, but now I needed the descriptions. So this is actually moving on from step 7, research, and moving on to step 8, episode descriptions. It's something you need for every episode. It's required. But guess what? Since AI knows the title for all these things and knows the full research that's powering all the episodes and the outline, it's easy for it to go and knock out the descriptions too. So I was like, hey, write the description for the show notes for this first episode, and then bam. And then I was like, now create another canvas for Claude Hopkins. And then you guess how that goes. Now do the same thing for the 3rd episode. Now the 4, next, now 7, now 8, right? And I just knocked them all out really fast. I mean, it only takes it a few minutes to write each one. And so I was just like, next, wait, next. And that's how you can knock out a whole series so fast, is you're getting all the busy work done so freaking quickly. So let's move into the last step. So now I have the show notes done. I have the research done. I take each research, moving into step 9, Google Notebook LM. I take the research in each of these canvases and I load them into a separate Google Doc. I found was kind of the best way to load the canvas into Notebook LM. So here we have Notebook LM. You just have to create a new notebook. And then here, instead of just copying and pasting it in, I loaded it from a Google Doc. It then takes it and it'll give you the ability to generate a deep dive conversation. This is the podcast content. You click generate. It takes a few minutes for it to generate, but once it's done, you can download it and then you have your content. And you are pretty much done from there. So I will say that Google LM is a little clunky. It's not the easiest thing to use, but if you go in there, you can figure it out. You don't really need a tutorial on how to do it. You just have to click around and work your way around it a little bit. There's probably other people who have done better tutorials on Google Notebook LM, so go watch those. This one, I'm just showing you my step-by-step process for building and launching this podcast in 3 hours. So you can see I have notebooks for each. I built a notebook for each the marketing legends and just generated a podcast and downloaded it. Next, if you didn't know, you can launch a free podcast through Spotify for podcasters, and it'll help walk you through the whole process. But by now, you have everything you need. You have the cover art, you have the title, you have the show episode. So all you're pretty much doing is data entry at this point and uploading the episodes that match each title, right? All of it's done. The author is you. The show description is there. The description for each of the individual episodes is there. You just upload it. You will have to do, and then once you hit publish, it's available on Spotify. You have to do slightly more work in order to get into Apple. So you just have to Google how to get podcast on Apple in order to get it up there, because you have to hook up the RSS feed. But it's pretty simple. Just Google the process. It'll walk you through it, and then bam, you will have a full show available for people to listen to. The only drawback of this is it's not a video podcast, and you know me, I'm big into video podcasting, but Google Notebook LM only does the audio for now. So if you want, let me see, pull it up here. It does create this audio clip for you. I'm still amazed that I was able to produce this in just 3 hours, and it's the exact content that I've been wanting to make for years. So I think you can actually do this yourself to come up with content, maybe even test content or tease content, or find and do this for internal content for your sales reps or your marketing team. There's so many different applications of this, and I'll be trickling out more as we go along. But I just thought I would show how I took an idea and then walked it all the way through the podcast and making a compelling episode. So if you don't think it's compelling, if you doubt it, go and listen to it and then tell me otherwise. Tell me this isn't good, right? Based on the fact that this is pretty much fully generated AI with me just kind of guiding it through the process. Again, you can find the link to Marketing Legends in the show description, and let me know if this kind of content was interesting to you. Every once in a while, one of you will reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just find me at linkedin.com/in/digitalmarketingdan. And let me know if this show impacted you, or if this particular episode impacted you. I love getting feedback from you. If it was worth it, then also give me a 5-star or however many stars you think I'm worth, and wherever you're listening to this. If you're listening to a podcast, if you're listening to YouTube, give me a thumbs up. It helps a ton. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to the AI-Driven Marketer. If this show was any good, please give it a 5-star or whatever star rating you think it deserves on the podcast app that you're listening to, and tap that thumbs up button on YouTube. And if you want to dive deeper into AI and you're still not sure if you've mastered the fundamentals, go to my free AI course at AIDrivenMarketer.com and take a look. Learn the fundamentals, and you will never have to look for a prompt cheat sheet again. 5 video series, and you'll even find that I've customized the course so it's hyper personalized for you, your role, and the people you're marketing to. Take a look at it, and let's get started so we can do more with AI today.